pension reform and the privatization of the pension funds or individualization of them, but there were also other important steps taken during this period. I mean, you had labor market deregulations, which actually also were described as you crushed the Chilean trade unions. You had property law regulations and the copper mine reprivatizations. All those, and you had also land rural reforms. So in total taken, what were the steps during this period?
Yes, you're right. This pension reform has been called by a magazine the mother of all reforms. But as you say very well, there are many very important reforms. This whole thing has to be coherent. You cannot have only a reform in one sector and have the other sector in a completely different logic. So, for example, labor reform. It was not crushing the unions, on the contrary. The unions during the first 4 years after the authoritarian government came in, they didn't have any possibility of electing their leaders, of meeting, of having new unions formed. So when I became labor minister, the first thing I said, in a free society you have to have free labor unions. So this was, and I immediately allow elections. I allowed them to just, a group of people, 10, 15 people, joined together and created a trade union without even the government permission. They go to the courts. I allow collective bargaining again, but at the decentralized level.
Yes.
Not at the national level where a strike is really a revolutionary strike and then you have the politicians intervening because you cannot allow a national strike forever. I said, collective bargaining should be about allowing workers to get wage increases in line with productivity. And where productivity
in specific companies.
In a specific company, because that's where you can assess productivity. So collective bargaining began under my decision in 1979, very early on. Even a very famous political scientist called my labor reforms the general essay of democracy. Democracy came in 10 years later. But in 1979, we had strikes, we had collective bargaining, we had elections, we had, and this was very important. Second, yes, mining is incredibly important.
Because copper mines are very central for Chilean exports.
Exactly.
Yes.
And regrettably, during the Allende period, in order to confiscate the American mines, he had to change the constitution and abolish property rights in mining. We are a very legalistic country. You cannot confiscate only the American. You had to confiscate everyone. But what happened then is that for 10 years, there was not any investment in mining in Chile, because if you don't have property rights, who will bring $1 billion or $2 billion?
And productivity per capita went down for the workforce.
Yes, because if you cannot have a new investment, productivity goes down. So that was another of my laws. It's called the Mining Constitutional Law, where I created property rights in mining in Chile. I didn't privatize the big copper company because that had been nationalized by a unanimous vote of Congress, and it was a very sensible and delicate point. So I said I would prefer to open new mining. Why foreign companies should come to Chile and explore, and probably we have much more wealth than we know. At that moment, because I was Minister of Mining after Labor and after Social Security, Chile was producing 1 million tons of copper. Do you know that today we are producing 5 million tons of copper? And for us, copper is like oil for Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
It's a very important commodity. We have multiplied by 5 the copper production. Chile today is the largest copper producing country in the world. It's not the United States. It's Chile with almost 40% of world copper production. And that is thanks to a law. See, property rights, laws, are extremely important because they create incentives for people to invest, to take risks, and to eventually produce wealth. And that wealth is distributed around the country, because you can see today in Chile, Antofagasta, a city in the north, booming, is the mining capital of the world.
Still, and property rights were also implemented on the rural level, because the idea we have about the Latin American rural production is that you have a lot of large latifundia which are unproductive, which are owned by very rich people who don't care of them. But this system was abolished already before.
Yes, you're right. In the 60s, in Chile there was what is called the agrarian reform, where the big non-utilized farms were confiscated. Regrettably, they were not paid correctly, and that created a lot of problems that later exploited in several ways. But at that moment, the land became a community ownership. But regrettably, they didn't give individual ownership to the farmers, and therefore, when people do not have individual ownership, and that is well known, you see that happened in the Soviet Union. That's why Stalin. They
went to their private plots and produced much, much more.
Exactly.
This is what happened in
Chile.
Chile.
What happened during the period when I was minister is that at the same time we were producing a property rights to the little farmer. We were producing little capitalist farmers. And that began to increase agriculture production a lot. So in general, as you say very well, the whole development strategy was about giving the people property rights, giving them freedoms, also improving education, improving health, because you cannot have equality of opportunity if the poor people do not have good nutrition. Because it has been, for example, proven that if a child during the first months or year have a brain damage because of bad nutrition, you are wasting your money sending that person to a foreign university. The person had a damage at the very beginning of their lives. So we created a program that was very successful to focus resources and energy and imagination in order to improve the nutrition levels of the very, very young. You see, this is so important for a progressive person, because this is all about having people, giving people the possibility of some equality of opportunity. You cannot have perfect equality of opportunity in this life. So we began with nutrition, not health, then health, then primary education, then secondary education. Then we opened universities. Universities in Chile were only government-owned or the Catholic Church. And that is a monopoly, a duopoly. We said, no, why don't we allow more universities in order that more people can go? So
this created gradually a rather affluent middle class. Affluent in Chilean terms, at least. And
exactly.
Then this middle class did not want only economic progress, but they also asked for liberty.
Of course, and we thought it that way. That was our master plan from the very beginning when I gave that conference in 1997, and it's there.
And the generals accepted this?
Yes, because that is very important. There is a famous paper by Jean Kirkpatrick, an American thinker, that made a difference between...
The former UN ambassador of the United States.
Perfect, yes. Perfect. She said, we must distinguish between a dictatorship, a totalitarian government, a government that wants to control power forever, and has a theory for that. That was Hitler, and that was Stalin, and that was Saddam Hussein, and that is in North Korea, Kim Il-jong. People who have a theory for the permanent control of power. And in order to have permanent control of power, you have to control people's life, all of the education, everything, because people will not allow that. And there is a difference thing that are called authoritarian governments, that are governments that regrettably are not democratic because they emerge from a revolution, from a crisis, from a war. But those governments do not have a philosophy of controlling power forever.
But it's
a transitional. The Chilean government, from the very first day, was a transitional government.
But on the other hand, you could say it took the Chilean generals 17 years to relinquish power.
Yes, there is no theory on how much